Welcome, everybody, to this final edition of the second season of Northern Spin. I'm Michael Taylor. I'm a journalist, a politico, and I'm the editor of the business desk in the Northwest. And this... Who are you again?
Happy Clappy, Mr. Positive himself, Chris, only published good news, Maguire, which is exactly what you said last week. Actually, I've got a confession to make. Today I thought I'd dress down by getting rid of my tie, only to turn up for this recording on Monday, and Michael Taylor's wearing his three-piece suit. So, if I'm Mr. Happy Clappy, then you are Mr. Doom and Gloom Taylor. And if you think I'm being harsh, then you can prove me wrong in this episode, the 10th episode of Northern Spin Season 2. Now, I've got some good news to start, which won't surprise you for a second. The last two episodes of Northern Spin have been among the two most downloaded episodes of the podcast ever.
Brilliant. We must be doing something right.
We are, absolutely. We've obviously got big families. 18% increase in subscribers. The good news doesn't end there. Although this might be the final episode of Season 2 and people out there will be thinking, oh no, the news is Series 3 will be back. We've been having talks with our friends at What Media. They're watching us as always, recording this podcast. Our sponsors at Oscar Technology and your agents, who've driven a very hard bargain. And we are doing a third season of Northern Spin. Teesside Mayor Ben Blocker-Houchin, you'll be delighted. We're doing it for you, Ben.
Yeah, so we're here to provide not only observation but insight, to give some behind-the-scenes glimpses about what's going on in Northern politics, Northern life, Northern culture, business. And we think we can do that every time we do one of these podcasts, don't we, Chris?
100%, yeah.
I'd like to thank our sponsors at What Media and Lily Technology. Oscar Technology and Lily Shippen, isn't it?
Absolutely, you morphed the two together there.
I have, yeah. Oscar Technology and Lily Shippen. Now, Oscar's consultants truly are specialists in the world of technical roles that they recruit for. They're trained about the technologies that their candidates work on, and they use data to provide market insights for their clients. So what trends are you seeing in tech recruitment, Chris?
Well, I was talking to Oscar, but I was also talking to a number of tech companies last week. There's definitely a move towards bringing employers back into the workplace. I think we've had COVID. Obviously, we're still living with COVID, but there's definitely a move to try and bring them back into the workplace as well. Not just them as well, but everybody, politicians and civil servants as well. Personal thanks as well to Marple resident. We're going to talk about Marple a lot today. Andy Morell, he's the CEO of Oscar. 5 episodes into season 1 of Northern Spin, he phoned me up and he said, Chris, he said, we love what you and Michael are doing. We want to get behind it. It's great for the North. He sponsored us. He's come on board for the third series as well. And we're also, hopefully, Lily Shippen will join us as well. So thank you very much to those two. Lily, we'll be talking about Lily Shippen in part 2 of Northern Spin.
Right, that's a lot to get through. A lot of thank yous there. But also, we've got quite an agenda, haven't we? What's on the news list
well,
this morning?
If this was a news bulletin, I'd be saying, Rishi Sunak gets nasty. The Tories and Labour draw up battle lines. Is the curtain coming down on Oldham's Coliseum Theatre? What is MIPN and why should we bother? And why should we care about it? MP selections or deselections? What is Liz Truss up to? I still haven't got the answer to that. And what's Jeremy Corbyn doing? And finally, I go undercover in Marple, which is where you live, of course.
So hold on a minute. Rishi Sunak gets nasty. I can't quite see that one. So try and stand that argument.
Okay. So last week, really, really interesting because what you saw were two really distinct battle lines being drawn between the Conservatives and Labour. You can tell we're on an election footing. I know we're probably 18 months away from it. I don't need to remind you, last week marked Sunak's first 100 days as Prime Minister. You probably got the champagne out. Something the PM marked with a very sugary video on social media. He doesn't really do social media very well, in my view.
He doesn't do anything very well.
No, he doesn't do social media very well. He said, trust is earned and I will earn yours. I was going to do a Rishi Sunak impression, but I can't do it. And others will talk about change. I will deliver it. Now, let's be honest. The first 100 days have been about steadying the ship after the disastrous Liz Truss premiership. But one minister has said Sunak is to take his cashmere jumper off. So I think we've entered the second phase.
Did somebody really say that?
Yeah, somebody said that.
Unbelievable.
And so we're going to enter the second phase of his premiership. Now, Labour continue to paint him as weak and small, something you've mentioned before on previous podcasts. I thought Sunak landed a blow on Keir Starmer at PMQ's last week when he challenged a Labour leader about his MP, Rosie Duffield, who claimed Labour had a problem with women. If he can't be trusted to stand up for women in his party, Sunak said, he can't be trusted to stand up for Britain. That sounds like quite a nice line until you hear him say it, actually. It loses all its gravitas. The other clear and obvious dividing line is around strikes. We heard a lot about that over the weekend and unions. Sunak hasn't conceded an inch to the strikers, and he's trying to paint Starmer and the Labour Party as being in bed with his union paymasters. We hear that every PMQs. Sunak even did an interview with Piers Morgan. Now, I'm definitely sensing a change of approach to a more assertive Sunak. What do you think?
I think he's got to be pretty desperate if he's having interviews with Piers Morgan on a TV station with probably even fewer viewers than us. And it didn't do much for the career of Cristiano Ronaldo, did it? Although obviously he went on to the wilderness and a bigger paycheck, which maybe that's what faces Sunak when he moves back to Silicon Valley.
Just for the benefit of the viewers on YouTube as well, I just had a mouthful of tea when you made me laugh there. Now, I think Piers Morgan's got 660,000 viewers, and we haven't got
on
that
his
many
YouTube
yet.
channel, but his Talk TV channel, hardly anyone watches it.
Yeah.
That's why they got Nadine Dorries on. Anyway, so let's talk about Sunak. He came in, right? His reputation was as a competent technocrat who wanted to introduce, as you say, integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level of government. Let's actually have a look at what's happened in that first 100 days. The whole Zahawi affair blows those claims at accountability and integrity right out of the water. He appointed him. So does his poor judgment over his wife, avoiding tax on her foreign earnings and retaining non-dom status. Let's not forget, too, that Sunak's deputy is Dominic Raab, who Simon MacDonald, the former Whitehall Mandarin, who ultimately did for Boris Johnson when he caught him out on a lie, said at the weekend, Dominic Raab could be as abrasive and controlling and could genuinely see how people working for him felt bullied. Apparently one of Raab's techniques is to stop a meeting and go, I'm not continuing until I've got the right papers. You know, that kind of menacing tone that he brings to things. By the way, someone somewhere should be running the Justice Department. It doesn't appear to be him. We can talk about that in a moment. Sunak tried to keep Gavin Williamson in the Tory Big Tent. And I always come back to this, Chris. What does he believe in? Like I said last week, what's his bigger picture? His 5 pledges, which he's pinning his survival on, are all about near-term fires to put out. Fires that, for the most part, his party have started. So what else can we expect from tough guy Sunak?
Well, I don't think he's going to be starring in a remake of Die Hard anytime soon. And it is important to give a sense of balance as well, because when you listen back to these podcasts, and a lot of people do, and they listen to him, they binge listen, a bit like Happy Valleys, which we'll be talking about later as well, you find yourself changing slightly. And I'm not. You know, last week, I said Sunak had a terrible week as Prime Minister, probably his worst. I thought the handling of the Nadim Zahawi tax affair was a disaster. However, since sacking him last Sunday, I think he's done pretty well. I'm glad you mentioned Dominic Raab. Don't be surprised to see him bin Raab off at record speed if and when this bullying report upholds the complaints against him, now totaling 24. I wouldn't be surprised to see Raab fall on his sword and resign as well. Where Sunak is going to need to grow a backbone is standing up to some of the backbenchers as well, because he's basically U-turned on a couple of things so far. I think the issue of the Northern Ireland Protocol comes back to Parliament this week. The small boats crossings are approaching, and Sunak's newfound tough guy persona is going to be put to the test as well. Like I say, when we started the podcast, I wanted to try and provide some insight. I'm aware that it's more my commentary than insight, but do you think I'm being too much of a fan club member?
Yeah. Well, you completely are. You've got to take this in its round, and you've also got to look at the net results of his leadership. People just aren't buying into the idea that beyond these 5 pledges that he's got anything to offer what the country will be like. I don't see it. So if Raab goes, right, and I hope he does, because I think it's terrible what people seem to have been through who've worked for him. It'll be Suella Braverman next, who Labour will turn their spotlight on, as Yvette Cooper has done so quite effectively already, or Therese Coffey, or Michael Gove. Look, Gove hasn't been true to his pledge to measure his achievements in levelling up, and every single report, not necessarily by the Labour Party or trade unions or left-wing councils or the left-wing economists that did for Liz Truss at the weekend. Levelling up is not working. The gap is getting bigger. And that is one of the big issues that we, as the Northern Spin podcast, want to shine our light on. And Michael Gove has been completely absent from providing the data sets that would hold him to account. Again, one of the 3 pledges that Sunak said he'd bring to his government: accountability.
He might not be providing the data sets that you want, but I think he has been front and centre in levelling up certainly in the last month and a half. I mean, obviously, we had the latest announcement of grants from the Levelling Up Fund 2. He was obviously at the convention in Manchester 2 weeks ago as well. So he's not been absent, and he is making sure that levelling up is getting discussed and it is on the agenda. And also, Rishi Sunak, when he did his sugary video to mark his 100 days, levelling up was all over that as well.
It's not just about the sound bites, though, Chris. Come on, it's got to ultimately be about whether places get levelled up, whether opportunities get created for people in so-called left behind towns, or the coastal town they forgot to close down. Just bunging a 50 million quid at the Eden project in Morecambe is not a strategy to revive our seaside towns, nor is sweetheart deals for Blocker Ben Houchin and his mates up there in Teesside. Well, they're off killing crustaceans. But go on, you want to talk about Labour, don't you?
Well, just for the sake of record as well, I know Blocker Ben Houchin has blocked us, but for the sake of...
we can say what we want about him now.
For the sake of transparency as well, is that he denies, and there was a report which didn't blame the Teesside dredging for the death of the crustaceans. But anyway, let's talk about Labour, a subject you're familiar with. So this week is a huge week in terms of strikes and industrial action. There's going to be even more industrial action. The Sun did a story last week to say 160 Labour MPs have stood on picket lines. Worth making a point as well that Keir Starmer has banned his shadow cabinet from appearing on picket lines. There was a tweet which we both botted, actually. It was from an official Conservative account, revealed that Angela Rayner has received £264,552 in donations from the unions. Now, she responded quite robustly on Twitter saying, "Not quite the gotcha they think it is. I'm a proud trade unionist and Labour is the party of working people. Their donations are clean, democratic and fully declared. Who funds the Conservatives?" Do you think any of this stuff is landing, before I give you my opinion?
Well, I had a little look at some YouGov polling about the attitude towards the strikes and trade unions. Generally, the closest people are to the delivery of the services, the more sympathetic they are to the people who are in dispute, basically the nurses. But there's a lot more sympathy for the train drivers than you would expect. It's around, the public opinion is split about three ways. 30% broadly sympathetic, 30% outright hostile, and another 30% fairly undecided, and it sort of wavers depending on who it is who's striking. I think Angela Rayner's response was pretty good. My basic contention is that trade union money is the cleanest money in politics. How many Tory MPs would actually proudly boast, I am a proud advocate for the nuclear industry and I'm really pleased that they've given me 250 grand, or a telecoms company that are sticking up masts in my constituency, if you're one of the Northern Research Group MPs that got some money from IX Telecom. They're not. They're embarrassed by it because it's dirty money. You're expected to do something in return. The only things the trade union movement expect the Labour Party to do is to do what Labour MPs are elected to do, which is stand up for working people, for people who go to work to earn a living, and often, in many cases, may even be members of trade unions. And I know you'll throw back at me the decline in membership over the course of our lifetimes. But a friend of mine got made redundant last week, and due to the support of his trade union, community as it happens, and the legal advice that they provided, he's got a settlement that his young family can have some comfort as he looks to try and find a new job over the course of the next few months, and not think that he's going to, have to start with precarious employment somewhere else. I like to see trade unions defending people's rights in the workplace. It's their purpose. And since I've been a member of the community union, I've really enjoyed their seminars and their advice for newly self-employed people. I've seen the huge retraining programs they've got for people in an ever-changing economy. And I must admit, Chris, I saw Sharon Graham from Unite on Laura Kuenssberg, and I thought she was excellent. Partly, you might think she was a bit feisty, but I thought she was excellent because she was specifically talking about standing up for members and about the terms of their dispute. Where she differs from Len McCluskey is he was always about the internal battles in the Labour Party and trying to gain an advantage. It was a million miles away from that big boss macho politics of Len McCluskey and his attempts to support Jeremy Corbyn's leadership at all costs.
Len McCluskey was brilliant for the Conservatives because what he did, it painted the trade unions to be these monsters. And you're right, there's definitely a softer face to the trade unions now. I thought, and I differ from you slightly, but I didn't watch the Laura Kuenssberg interview, but I heard the interviews afterwards. I thought Sharon Graham was belligerent. And obviously, I get the point. She's standing up for her members. That's her job. She says that her pay demands could be met by the government through windfall taxes on the energy companies. Even Labour, I listened to the Westminster show this morning, said that wouldn't pay for years 2 and 3 and 4. So there is this idea that these money trees exist, and they don't. And I'll tell you one thing as well, is that the longer these industrial actions go on for, do you think the public are going to stay on the side of the strikers, or do you think they're going to lose support? Because my impression, and like I say, it's only anecdotally, is that the strikes break down into people have support for the nurses. They get that. I think the rail workers, people think, oh, this has been going on forever. And I think the teachers is one which I don't think they've got the same level of support of the health sector. Now, that's only an opinion, but that's my view. What's your view?
I think it's going to be interesting as time goes on and how people's lives are disrupted. I think that's definitely going to be a key factor in whether people are sympathetic to strikes or not. But I think it's also about how the trade unions themselves communicate what they're doing. I think they've been very clear. I think as long as he doesn't stray out of his lane too much, Mick Lynch is a very good communicator for the situation about what is going on the railway and how they've basically had a pay cut for the last few years. And I think as people experience, precarious employment, wage freezes, as long as they don't look outside and think, oh yeah, why are they getting that, in that kind of selfish way that I think the Daily Mail and the Sun want people to react. Actually, they think, well, fair play to you for having the ability, the smarts and the organisation in your workplace to stand up for what you want, because I think people are genuinely struggling and are seeing all over that those who have the ability and the smarts to be able to do it are striking. Typically, on the interview on Sunday on Laura Kuenssberg's show, she did what you're trying to do to me, is turn these disputes away from actually who's in government and make it an internal issue about the Labour Party. And it's on the government's watch. And Sharon Graham caught Grant Shapps out on a lie when he said about ambulance workers not providing cover for critical situations. Frankly, the NHS isn't providing critical basic service for those. If you get run over by a car, are you going to get an ambulance in anytime quickly? Probably not. That's under normal circumstances, never mind on a strike day.
It's just, if you look at the stats are interesting, because I thought, I watched a programme, that's what I do at the weekend. I watched a programme about strikes. There are just over 6 million trade union members in the UK. We have a population of over 60 million. So we have 6 million trade union members. The membership has dropped substantially in the last 20 years. Okay, I just make that point. I don't think it was a great week for the Labour Party. I'll make one exception to that. Lindsay Hoyle, I thought his put down to Gullis at PMQs was absolutely brilliant when he said that if you're going to talk in that tone of voice, you can do it outside the chamber. I thought that was brilliant.
Well, that's not good for Labour, though. That's just a deficit for the Tories. You can't think of Lindsay Hoyle as a Labour MP when he's performing his role as the neutral speaker.
Yeah, but he is a Labour MP, but you're right. Yeah, he is neutral. What about a Liverpool MP, Kim Johnson? She branded the Israeli government as, I quote, fascist, and used the term apartheid state. She was later criticised by Keir Starmer's spokesman, who described her remarks as unacceptable, and she subsequently apologised. Now, we've spoken before about this analogy which Roy Jenkins used when Tony Blair was in opposition and trying to win, the Labour general election in 1997 for the Labour Party, is like carrying a priceless Ming vase and not wanting to drop it. Do you feel that the way Labour manoeuvred very quickly around Kim Johnson and got her to apologise was driven by the desire not to drop this Ming vase?
Let me deal with your first point first, if you don't mind. I'll come on to that one. I'm not ducking the issue. Trade unions, yes, they've declined, but in that intervening period, look at what has increased. Precarious employment, 0 hours contracts, stagnant wages. They are all the facets of a less unionised workforce, right? Let's just hold that thought. The second point about holding the Ming vase and holding things together, I think it's actually for the Labour Party at the moment in opposition, 20 points ahead in the polls. It's about being quick and decisive over the very things that people thought Labour were weak and slow on, like in particular the debate on foreign policy issues where Jeremy Corbyn was out of step with most of British public opinion, it was unacceptable to describe Israel, given its history, as fascist. It is not the Labour Party policy to describe Israel as an apartheid state. It is perfectly acceptable to do what lots of Israeli citizens who live in the UK have been doing in the last week, which is protesting outside the embassy at Netanyahu's government and their appalling behaviour of the Israeli Defence Force in the refugee camp of Jenin in the West Bank. There's no problem with that. But I think what Starmer has done is clamp down pretty quickly on saying where the Labour's line is. The trouble is, that sort of language is commonplace and it comes very easily to people on the left of the Labour Party to describe Israel as an apartheid state. I'll tell you what, though, it's the only state in the Middle East you'd want to be gay in.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. No,
Cool.
it's really
Anyway, you want to lighten the mood a bit?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
A couple of weeks ago, we revealed. Well, we didn't reveal. We discussed about the Rishi Sunak had obviously been fined for not putting his seatbelt on in Lancashire. And I noticed one wag this week had actually put a blue plaque in Lancashire to mark the spot where Rishi Sunak was, committing this heinous crime. I mean, it just goes to show you, humour's not dead.
No, actually, I did see another video that. Those wonderful people led by donkeys did two great stunts that I saw in the last week. One was to put a blue plaque up outside 50 Tufton Street, where all those right-wing think tanks are. Say this is where Liz Truss killed the economy in 2022. And the other one was they put a big sticker on the side of Michelle Mone's yacht that they found in a harbour near Barcelona and changed it to something like pandemic profiteer. I thought that was good.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about MP candidate selections because we're running up into the final lap before the general election, whenever that might be, no later than the end of next year. Is that right, or is it this year?
Yeah,
next year.
I think it can be January 2025, but nobody would do it in January. So realistically, the latest date they reckon is, I think, the 4th of December 2024. I think something like that.
Okay, so you'll be in a good mood, Chris, on the candidate selections. Your mate Lee Anderson, the leader of the thick right, as I call them, the MP for Ashfield, he's announced that he's going to be standing again to defend his seat. He's been reselected.
Yeah, I mean, as I always state on this, he's not my friend. I do think he does Twitter quite well, though. But yeah, he has been reselected. No, there's been some really interesting candidate selections. And you mentioned a Twitter account to me called Tomorrow's MPs, run by Michael Crick. Fascinating. Yeah,
it's run by Michael Crick. Really entertaining Twitter account, as you'd expect from Crick, because he's quite a jolly fella. Anyway, he provides a running commentary on the long listing and shortlisting processes for candidates for the general election. Note to anyone out there, by the way, Chris, I have now supported 3 friends of mine, all brilliant Labour women who have been unsuccessful and been beaten by not spectacularly exciting white blokes. So if you want to become an MP, don't ask me for help. I've got a 3 out of 3 track record of not succeeding. Anyway, what it does show on one hand is you've got the drama of Labour selections all over the country. Lots of people, mediocre or spectacular, all really, really running for these tightly contested, micromanaged processes, basically to prevent the nutters getting in. And it provides cheap lines for sympathetic Tory commentators like you.
Well, I'm neither sympathetic and I'm conservative, the lowercase c, as I keep mentioning.
But lowercase something, definitely. Anyway, on the Tory side, there's also a scramble to quit politics altogether. Notably, the most recent one, Edward Timpson from the Timpsons key-cutting dynasty.
Yeah, we like
He's
him.
the latest to announce that he won't be standing, joining a long list of other palatable Tories like Chris Skidmore, the former HE minister who I did some work with, and my MP, Will Wragg. So, they've basically just had enough. And at this rate, they're going to be calling round for ringers at the last minute. Maybe you'll even get a tap on the shoulder.
I might just keep my phone on, actually, just in case I get the call. But,
and if you want to move to Marple, as you keep name-dropping into the conversation, maybe you could move into Will Wragg's office and be the Tory candidate for Marple.
One of the things that is interesting, and like I say, and people don't see this with Keir Starmer, is Keir Starmer is making sure that like the troubled, the potential MPs who could cause trouble or the potential candidates aren't being included on the long list, are they?
Yeah.
And there was one name that you spotted last night that I think is quite interesting.
Yeah, so Lee Drennan is going for one of the Bolton seats. He was a leading light in Young Labour in the North West. He might even be on the North West Steering Committee. I've seen Lee Drennan in action over the years. He's a leading member of Momentum. He was a councillor in Tameside before he lost his seat in Ashtonhurst, which is very close to where Angela Rayner actually lives, incidentally. And he's not made the long list for Bolton North East, which is currently a Conservative-held seat.
He's reported not to have made the long list. I noticed on Twitter he's not confirmed that, but yeah, absolutely. I saw a video that he did on YouTube for Young Labour when he was at the Labour conference in 2016.
Did you like him?
No, I didn't like him at all, actually. I thought to myself, you know what? This is somebody who would turn people off the Labour Party because he was so strident with his views. And what was interesting, actually, is how many people in the auditorium booed him as well. I think the loss of Edward Timpson's a big blow. I think the Conservatives can't afford to lose people of his stature. We mentioned in last week's podcast how many MPs are trying to set themselves up, Tory MPs are trying to set themselves up with media careers as well. And on that note, actually, I think I've got a call actually coming through from Rishi now asking if I'm available for the next general election. On that note, while I answer the phone, we're going to go into our first interval of Northern Spin. Yes, welcome back to the Northern Spin podcast. That was actually, wasn't Rishi Sunak at all. It was Ben Blocker-Houchin apologising, saying he's going to unblock me, but he's going to keep you blocked. Or is he? Now, Michael, you've interviewed thousands, probably millions of CEOs and MDs during your illustrious career. In your experience, how important is a personal assistant or an executive assistant?
Yeah, I'm not lying, Chris, when I say that many of the CEOs, MDs, or vice chancellors of universities couldn't function without their PA or their executive assistant. A lot of business leaders I know use their PA or EA as a sounding board and are a huge part of their success.
Yeah, I think the role of a PA and EA is now business, is now front and centre of a lot of businesses as well. Lily Shippen is a specialist recruitment agency for HR and business support staff with bases in Manchester. I met them this week and London. Lily Shippen recruit a range of roles, including executive assistants, personal assistants, office managers, receptionists, HR business partners, and many more. They work with businesses of all sizes and are experts in placing exceptional people with exceptional businesses. They don't just know how to recruit HR, which is one part, but they also know when to recruit as well. So if you're an MD, CEO, or business leader in the North or elsewhere, remember the name Lily Shippen.
Shippen.
Absolutely. Now, before we talk about on manoeuvres, I want to get your take on a big date in the calendar for the property, sector, and that's MIPIM. Now, people who don't involve themselves in property might not know it, but it's a 4-day real estate conference, exhibition, and networking event in Cannes that the great and the good will attend. It always takes place in March. Been hit by COVID in the last few years. Councils and companies from across the North will be there. Place Northwest run a list of all the companies who will be attending from the North, and it really is a who's who. You've been, Michael. What's it really like? Is it a expensive junket, pure and simple, or is it where business gets done?
Well, as you've not been, have you?
Never been. I've been waiting for an invite, but not been.
Well, as well as being an upmarket resort, Cannes, not to call it Cannes,
so I am.
Cannes is a convention town. So it's got the Palais de Festival right in the middle. And I've been loads of times actually to Cannes for 6 different events that I could tot up. That I was thinking about. In fact, I did a questionnaire recently for Muckrat, which is a journalist database. And one of the questions was, what's your favourite ever story pitch? And mine was easy. It was, hi, Michael, Roger from Quantel here. How would you like to come to the Cannes Film Festival with us on our private jet?
Did you go?
Yeah, of course I did. It was absolutely fantastic. But the reality of it, though, apart from one time when I went, there was just a company at a conference and they wanted me to present some research that I'd done when I was the editor of a tech magazine. They put me up in the Majestic Hotel, which during the film festival or MIPIM would be like thousands a night. But they put me up in there because it was just them running a conference there. Usually you fly on EasyJet, not on a private jet or a PJ, as viewers of Succession would know it. And you stay in an Ibis or the French equivalent of a travel lodge with the prices absolutely cranked up. But here's the thing though, Chris, and I kind of detected it in your introduction as well. There's this absolute teeming resentment that you get. And I used to get it from people back home in the office in the UK. It's absolutely off the scale because all the optics about what MIPIM is, any conference in Cannes. You know, I used to go to international conventions in Amsterdam, Las Vegas, and Cannes. I mean, it doesn't get more decadent than that, does it? But anyway, MIPIM stands for something that no one can ever remember. MIPIM, and most people just regard it as a massive international piss-up in the Mediterranean. But anyway, interestingly, Andy Spinoza's new book, Manchester Unspun, out soon, has a brilliant chapter on how the court of King Howard, so Howard Bernstein to everyone else, really consolidated its power around MIPIM by who was prepared to go all the way down to the south of France to have meetings to support the Manchester family in their efforts to promote the city globally. And it really was where connections were made, where bonds were formed, and where the inner circle really started to shape.
I mean, Gary Neville went a couple of years ago to give a talk as well.
He did. He's been a few times.
Yeah. I always wanted to go. I am still available if anybody wants me to host events out there. But on manoeuvres,
I once hosted an event. I won't say which town, but some towns that weren't core, that weren't Manchester or London or Barcelona or Milan. That's where the big noise is. That's where all the excitement is. And we got sponsored to host an event for a town in the Midlands, and there were actually more people on the panel and in the audience.
Yeah, no. Thing is with MIPIM, and I've not been, but a lot of the developers will hold back developments just to announce it there because they know they're going to have the platform. Listen, talking about platforms and talking about things that really irked me over the weekend, and as you know, I'm a sociable guy. Liz Truss's 4,000-word diatribe in the Sunday Times. We're talking on manoeuvres now, and the first candidate this week is
it was the left-wing podcasters who did it, was it?
The former Prime Minister. People keep saying it's now 45 days or 49 days. Nobody seems to want to admit how long it was. And she did this 4,000-word interview or essay in the.
It was an essay, wasn't it? She literally wrote it.
Yeah, 4,000 words without the word sorry. Now remember, she was the Prime Minister who completely crashed the economy. People say to me, "What's your view on Liz Truss?" And I say, "I'm just having to renegotiate my mortgage because it's come up to the end of its 5-year cycle. It's costing me an extra £100 because of her and because of Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget that crashed the economy." Now, she believed you could cut taxes by borrowing billions of pounds, but the markets decided she didn't have a clue what she was talking about. She's kept a very low profile for the last 100 days since resigning. Now it's emerged. She's due to give her first public outing overseas since leaving. She's due to give a talk in Japan in which she's going to urge the government to watch China. We know she's been in Washington chewing the fat with like-minded Republicans who share her view on a low tax agenda. It's worth making a point. Conservatives do believe in a low tax agenda. It's just now's not the time to do it. Her allies, including former Levelling Up Minister Simon Clarke, who is mates with Ben Blocker-Houchin, have formed a group called the Conservative Growth Group to push her low tax agenda. This is the thing, you see. When people talk about friends of Liz Truss, they mention Simon Clarke, mention about 2 others, and that's it. According to Sky News, a WhatsApp group once used to support Truss's leadership campaign has begun to see several MPs rejoin. I think she's on manoeuvres, and I think she's on manoeuvres for 2 reasons. First, she's trying to rewrite history, and this really annoys me, so that people don't think she was the worst ever Prime Minister. And just remember, she followed Boris Johnson. I think she'll claim a lot of the problems we're experiencing are the reasons why we need low taxes. I thought her 4,000-word essay in the Sunday Telegraph undermined just why she was a terrible tin-eared Prime Minister. Secondly, I think she'll try and put pressure on Jeremy Hunt to cut taxes in the next budget. She was described in today, that's Monday's copy of the Times, as delusional. She's on manoeuvres. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I know subscribers to this podcast don't subscribe to hear us agree with one another, but basically, I came away with it thinking, has she got no proper friends? You know, you mentioned a diminishing number of friends like Simon Clarke, but has she got no friends who could actually say, Liz, it's too soon? That Sunday Telegraph 4,000-word essay was just appalling. As you say, it didn't contain any contrition, as Liz Kendall said on the Laura Kuenssberg show at the weekend, no humility, and slating the left-wing financial establishment for as doing her in. Presumably, it's a bit like the what did she call it? The anti-growth coalition. I just think she's a moron. No contrition that people's mortgages have quadrupled. No humility that she was completely out of her depth intellectually. And if anyone listening to this podcast, watching us two, bumbling away through this podcast, ever suffers from imposter syndrome, just take a look at Liz Truss, because don't fret, if an emotionally unintelligent imbecile like that can become the Prime Minister of this country, then reach for the stars, my friends. Reach for the stars.
can I just thank Liz Truss, because myself and Michael, have been brought together by your incompetence. And I don't do personal attacks, but I just looked at that interview and I looked at the essay and I just thought to myself, she just doesn't get it. And actually, if you're passionate about trying to do something positive for the Conservative Party, do nothing.
Yeah,
because
shut up.
You're an embarrassment. Now, okay.
Who else is on manoeuvres then?
Well, this is another one, actually, and I think we're going to get an interesting view on this. This one's a bit left field, quite literally. Former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. Now, it's worth saying, before I give my reasons, I think it might be helpful if you explain why Labour removed the whip from him, because he's currently a independent MP.
Yeah, and the Unite leader Sharon Graham said on the Laura Kuenssberg show this weekend that he should be allowed to stand for Labour in Islington North in the next election. Anyway, so there was a report into anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, commissioned not by Keir Starmer, but by the Equality and Human Rights Commission. And it ruled that the party was institutionally racist. Now, rather than accept the findings that under his watch, that set of circumstances had come about, Corbyn's reaction was to deny it and claim such claims were exaggerated by his opponents for political purposes. Now, I could bore for Britain on this one. I've written extensively on the whole anti-Semitism dispute in Labour and how it made Jewish people feel. And I think what it clearly highlighted for me about Jeremy Corbyn is his blind spot when it comes to Jewish people. He doesn't see how denying them the legitimacy of their offence is in itself offensive, despite being given ample opportunities to clarify, to apologise to the Jewish community in this country. He chooses not to, and instead feeds the mob, making it all about him.
Yeah, I mean, there was an interview that he did this week, and the reason that I've put him on manoeuvres this week is that I listened to the Newsagents podcast, and he did an interview on Friday, and he's gone quiet, hasn't he? He's gone quiet. He's used as the butt of Rishi Sunak's attacks at PMQs. And he's suddenly done this interview on the newsagents as well. I think he has become an embarrassment to Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. And we're going to come at it from a slightly different view because, having gone quiet for all this period of time, he suddenly put his head above the parapet. Now, obviously, if he is an independent, he can't stand as a Labour Party MP at the next election, which I think would be his 11th. Now, the Daily Mail, a publication I know you read most days, say he's begging to be allowed to stand for the Labour Party in the next general election. I'm not sure about that. The Daily Express headline is that Jeremy Corbyn blasts Starmer as he demands to stand for Labour at the next election. Now, I'm going to be super cynical here, super duper cynical. I think what Corbyn's trying to do is to put some distance between him and Starmer for Starmer's benefit. And the reason I say that for is I wonder whether or not he's saying, I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll put some blue sky between me and you. But he's also saying to the Labour Party, I'm still here. I want to stand at the next election in Islington for Labour. Let's make it happen and I won't be an embarrassment to you. Do you agree?
I don't think he's capable of that level of intellectual mind games. I think that's nonsense, if I'm honest. He doesn't like Starmer. On the Newsagents podcast, he was quite clear when he was saying Starmer's no friend of mine, that he was surprised when Starmer described himself as a friend of Jeremy Corbyn when he was standing for leader. I don't think Starmer covered himself in glory when he was basically trying to harvest the votes of the far left during the Labour leadership election. I think it's created a lot of problems for himself. But generally, no, I just think he's just desperate to stand again, to give him. He's like George Galloway, another preening narcissist. He just wants his place in Parliament. Do you know what? There is no law in this country that Jeremy Corbyn has ever brought forward that has made people's lives any better. He's just a protester. He's just a student protester. Yeah,
he said that he was asked a question, will he retire? And he said, I'll retire when I die, basically. And you think to yourself, well, that's about you again.
It is. It's all about him. He just loved it, didn't he?
So Liz Truss and Jeremy Starmer Jeremy Corbyn. Sorry to embarrass you, Keir Starmer. If you want to sue me, feel free, but we've got no money. So Jeremy Corbyn and Liz Truss have brought us together on Northern Spin, an unlikely mix of people that I wouldn't want to see at a dinner table. So thank you very much to you two. They're both on manoeuvres. That's the end of part 2 of this episode of Northern Spin. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back back to the third and final part of Northern Spin, episode 10 of season 2. In a moment, I'm going to talk to my good friend Michael Taylor, who wearing a three-piece suit, about my trip to Marple, where I can reveal there isn't a statue to Mr. Taylor. But on a serious note, I was very sad to see that the curtain might be coming down on Oldham's Coliseum Theatre. That is sad news, and I know you're particularly perplexed by it.
Yeah, so Oldham Coliseum Theatre has cancelled all its performances after the Arts Council turned its 3-year bid for funding down. It's not a good look for Oldham. I got in touch with Will Lees-Jones, the chair of Oldham's town team, and I got a real sense that all's not well in the kingdom of Oldham. We did a story on the Business Desk, which was one of our best read last week. And I noticed at the launch of the Oldham Independent Economic Review last year, where there was some real optimism, honesty, soul-searching that was all convened by my good friend Andy Westwood, professor and ex-government advisor. There's some real thinking in Oldham about how we can sort of make our place, bring some pride back and bring the institutions of the town together. But he told me last week that given the precariousness of organisations like Oldham Coliseum, you would think the government would have a levelling up emergency fund, or at least be more joined up about how different funding bodies support it. But alas not. So the actor Maxine Peake has pushed a petition. But here's the thing, though. It's not just to save Oldham Coliseum. The 8,000 signatures and counting that have signed up for this aren't just directed towards the Art Council, asking them to rethink their decision, but they're very critical of Oldham's lack of foresight on this issue. They're supposed to be working up a plan for a £5 million new arts centre in the town, but the trustees have got themselves in this short-term mess with the theatre that they can't seem to fund. Now, the key part about this, and I'm sure you'll recognise this, having been a local newspaper journalist in the community that you live in Chorley, places need cultural assets. They could be job creators, but also they just make people feel proud. They make people feel good about the town that they're in. Where we live in Marple, there's a small amateur theatre, a single-screen cinema, lots of community groups, more than in most other wards in the Stockport Metropolitan Borough, by the way. And you have to support them. You know, the life of a community depends on all these sorts of things. I have actually been to your theatre. I've been to Chorley Little Theatre.
It's not my theatre. It's not like it's called Chris's Theatre. But
but it's in Chorley. It's in your town. It's called the Chorley Little Theatre.
Yeah.
I didn't see you there, though, but that was before you were into politics.
No. No. I mean, I'm a
I went to see Matt Ford, by the way.
Matt Ford.
He was brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, but what people might not necessarily realise is a lot of the top performers, a lot of the comedians, people like
John Bishop.
John Bishop, he's performed there, and what they do, they practice on an audience of 200, and then they just fine tune their act. I mean, like when I was the editor of the Chorley Guardian, the first thing I did was work with people like Chorley Little Theatre and the football club as well, and they are the fabric of the community. And the reason I mention the football club as well is because Northern Agenda with Rob Parsons did a really interesting piece about a study by an organisation called Open Goal in partnership with Northern Research Group, which says that unless action is taken, a lot of football clubs in the north face an uncertain future. And when I became the editor of the Chorley Guardian, the first thing that I did, the football club, Chorley Football Club, obviously,
the Magpies.
Was the Magpies. Yeah. It was facing severe threat. I mean, it's been going for over 100 years. And I launched a campaign called Save Our Magpies, and we raised £17,000, which seems like a drop in the ocean, but it was enough to sort of galvanise the community and get it behind the club. And you look at the club now. I mean, they're getting 1,500 people to a game.
Where are they? National League North?
Yeah, I think it's the fifth tier of football. And
sixth.
Yeah, sixth. They had the opportunity. They went up, but they were one of only 3 teams in that league who weren't full time.
Yeah,
and the manager, the manager Jamie Vermiglio was the head teacher of a local school.
Yeah.
He wasn't prepared to give up his career in order to manage a team, knowing how reckless and how short-sighted football can be. But it's just football is like theatres. It's the fabric of the community.
Yeah, well, we all know what happened with Bury FC, but although we've ducked the trans issue, haven't we? We don't really want to go there because we're a bit frightened, really.
Yeah, we are.
You've kind of ducked out of the anti-Semitism discussion, so I'm seriously advising you that don't go there with the two groups claiming to be Bury Football Club.
Yeah.
On one hand, you've got the Liberation Front for Football in Bury, and on the other, you've got the Football Front for Bury Liberation or something like that, or the Supporters Trust.
Yeah, we've always said when we try and do this podcast, we want to try and add some insight. And we've touched briefly on the whole trans issue. And I don't think we can add any value to it in a 5-minute conversation.
No, that's fair.
Anti-Semitism as well. It's such a massive conversation. How can we offer any insight into it as two middle-aged white guys? I don't think we can. In terms of football, I think that's slightly different. And I was a consultant in Rochdale for 2 years, and I got to know the people at Rochdale AFC, the football club, really well, actually. And I look at that football club and I worry. I really do worry. What Open Goal highlighted is that in the north, 1/3 of league clubs are based in the north, but 2/5 of administrations occur in the north. We saw the difficulties that Bolton faced. I come from Kent. The only league team that we had in Kent was Gillingham. So I used to support a non-league team called Dover. So we didn't have any great allegiances to any football clubs down there. Where I live in Chorley, we're within probably 10 miles of about 10 or 12 different clubs. I look at the situation at Rochdale. Quick recap. A company called Morton House wanted to buy the club, but the fans rebelled. The club is now completely fan-owned. I got to know the former CEO, David Bottomley, pretty well. He's been demonised by a vocal number of fans. I don't know all the ins and outs of what went on. What I do know is they're now languishing at the bottom of League Two. They're in danger of dropping out of the league. Their chairman, Simon Gage, is desperately trying to find new investors, which is the same thing that David Bottomley said to me about 3 years ago. Rochdale were badly hit by COVID. Look, it's not that long ago since they played at Man United and they lost 2-1 in their cup game. And then they played Newcastle, which I went to, where I met Andy Burnham on the following Saturday. They've had to sell their best players to survive. They lost 2-1 to Moneybag Salford City on Saturday. They're now 4 points adrift at bottom of League Two. They've played 29 games. I'm seriously worried about the future of Rochdale Football Club, and it would be a massive loss because they are a huge community asset.
Yeah, well, I only had to see for myself when I was working in Stockport about how much the opposite fortunes of Stockport County with their successive promotions have really helped lift the morale in that place. Do you know, Chris, at one point there was a plan to merge Oldham, Bury and Rochdale and form one club, North Manchester United or something like that. This sort of thing, by the way, goes on in Scotland quite a lot. But of the three, only Rochdale are in the league now. And when Blackburn Rovers were in League One in 2017-2018, we played Rochdale, Bury and Oldham. In fact, Oldham beat us. And now, of course, you know, they could all be in the National League next year, or even Oldham, look the way they're going, they could be in National League North down there with Chorley. It doesn't help as well that Blackburn Rovers failed to complete the transfer of a young player from Rochdale during the transfer window, which when the club gave a statement, they said, you know, not getting this transfer through is really bad for us. We wanted the player. The player wanted to come. But more importantly, it's really, really important for clubs like Rochdale to be able to recycle players and make money by passing them on. I mean, it's how every club works, isn't it? I mean, you know, apart from perhaps Man City and Real Madrid, every club in the world and Chelsea, every club in the world at some point sells to make some income.
Rochdale had a young player called Luke Matheson. He was the lad who scored for Rochdale at Man United at Old Trafford as well. But now, we're sitting next to each other on this podcast. We do every Monday as well. But fairly soon, Michael, we might be living together.
No, come on. Come on. Tell everybody about your trip to Marple.
Yeah, I mean, do you not want to live with me?
No.
Okay. So I went to Marple because it's something that you evangelise about most weeks on your, through social media. And I thought to myself, I'm going to visit it. I had to see a business down there as well. Wow. Unbelievable. I loved it. Fantastic canal. I mean, it always helps when the sun's out. And I didn't know that a personal hero of my childhood was from Marple, Timmy Mallet.
Well, I knew that, of course. In fact, recently I heard an amazing interview that Timmy Mallet did when he was a DJ on Piccadilly Radio with Terry Hall, who was the lead singer of the Specials, who sadly died recently. But Timmy had done an interview with him on Piccadilly Radio where he gave Terry a couple of hours to pick his favourite records, and it's just absolute radio gold. But a few other people, if I could raise you, Bill Grundy, the man who got the Sex Pistols to swear on Thames TV. His son Tim as well, a TV and radio presenter as well. And of course, the late, great Anthony H. Wilson, who lived just off Strines Road. Where did you go when you were in Marple?
Well, we're taking out to lunch at a place called the Norfolk Arms, and the guy that I was with said to me, Chris, you've got to have one of their legendary pies. I ate it last Monday. Fairly soon, I won't feel so full again. It was huge, and it was just a really nice place. And actually, you talk about pubs, just a great feel about it. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, the Norfolk's great. My oldest son, Joe, worked there for a while. My youngest son, Elliot, works at the Scott, which is another pub just down the road from where you were in Marple Bridge. And incidentally, I often get invited to host what's called community dinners for delegates to this leadership organisation called the Forward Institute. And they say, can you host these dinners, these people to experience what life's like for people in the north of England? Can they come to your house for tea? The short answer is no. No one comes to my house for tea, except William Ragg. He's invited. But I took him to the Norfolk 2 years running, and people really loved it. It's great. It's really folksy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah. But fundamentally, it's about the quality of the food.
Yeah, so it's a good spot that you picked that one.
The food was sensational.
Yeah. So anyway, my excitement recently was heightened by the fact that Roddy Frame from Aztec Camera, one of my favourite bands, he used to live in Millbrow, just above Marple Bridge, where you were, when he was writing the Love album, which came out in 1987. Johnny Marr from the Smiths lived in Marple Bridge for a bit, and the Stone Roses lived on Strines Road when they were recording Second Coming, their difficult second album. But of course, Chris, all of that will be a complete mystery to you because you've never heard of any of them.
No, I have. I've
because
heard of
my
one.
attempts to give you a northern cultural education have all come to nothing.
I've heard of one. I've heard of one of them. Aztec Camera. What was their big hit?
Somewhere in My Heart.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was trying to remember. I was going to sing it, but then I thought we do want to encourage more subscribers. I remember playing a cricket match in Kent for my school team against Chatham House, and Aztec Cameras, Somewhere in My Heart, was playing out across the pitch. I got out soon afterwards, and I'm still blaming that song for the reason for my dismissal.
So have you got any other shallow cultural recommendations for us
I
this
have
week?
actually. I've been going to the cinema quite a lot this year, actually, and last week I went to watch The Fabelmans, which is based on the early life of Steven Spielberg. Very, very good. Some brilliant performances by the young actor called Gabriel Labelle, who plays essentially the young Steven Spielberg, albeit that's not his name in the film. Michelle Williams is amazing. Paul Dano plays Spielberg's father. He was amazing. But there was this guy, I was watching it, I'm thinking, I know that guy. And I couldn't identify him. Seth Rogen. That was
great,
brilliant.
isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of references of things that I've listened to or watched this week, I'm a massive podcast fan, and I love true crime. So I listened to BBC Sounds' new one. It's a gangster. It's called Gangster. They've done 3 so far. They've done Paul Massey,
Curtis Warren.
They've Curtis Warren. That was really good as well. The one they've done this one, their third one, is John Goldfinger Palmer. And if you like true crime, you'll love this. What have you watched, listened to, or viewed recently?
Well, Happy Valley. But no spoilers, right? Have you watched it?
Yeah, I watched it yesterday. Well, it's recording on the Monday. You watched it?
Yeah, I thought it was incredible. There was a tense part of it at the beginning where we thought it could get violent. And I said to Rachel, it's not going to, this final episode, and they're not going to do any more, is all about the acting.
Yeah.
And I just knew there was going to be a tense, long scene with James Norton and Sarah Lancashire as the 2 central characters in it. And it was amazing, actually, about how so many of the other sort of plot lines just got resolved like that.
Do you not think, though? I mean, I say, once again, we're not going to spoil it for those people who haven't watched it yet, but I watched Sarah Lancashire and James Norton, and I actually tried to think, who do I think is a better actor or actress than them two? Because you listen to James Norton, he's quite well spoken. He was sensational. But Sarah Lancashire, if ever they make a remake, if ever they turn Liz Truss's life into a film, I want Sarah Lancashire to play Liz Truss because I think she could bring us to life. Actually, and talking about Sarah Lancashire, you're going on a Fresh Walks fairly soon to Hebden Bridge. And once again, we don't want to give anything away, but you could completely ruin that Fresh Walks.
We could find 3 bodies in a field. Certainly could. I've also been... I'm thinking about putting together a true crime podcast, actually. It's given me a few ideas for some of the stories that I've been working on recently. I really enjoyed Alice Levine's podcast from last year about Russell King's takeover of Notts County and his bizarre plot to float a company with mining rights in North Korea. I mean, that's just absolutely bizarre, and it's really well put together. I have started listening to Goldfinger as well, and I do like it. I've also been watching Early Doors, and I'm interested to know what you think. And I think I should set you some homework because it's now available back on the BBC iPlayer, having not been for a while. It's Craig Cash, who wrote The Royal Family, you know, Dave.
Yeah.
It's set in a pub in Stockport, and it's just incredible writing and insight. And happily, as I said, back on the BBC iPlayer.
Because what was interesting about that, of course, is a lot of people gave all the credit for the royal family to Caroline Aherne, the late great Caroline Aherne.
Yeah, quite rightly too.
But people didn't realise that it was written in conjunction with Craig Cash. Very good.
He lives in Marplebridge as well, by the way. No,
does he?
He lives in Mellor, which is.
I tell you what,
a continuation.
The reasons for me to move to Marple are growing. Incidentally, if anybody wants me to move to Marple, please sign the petition.
When we've got our roof done, we might put the house on the market, so you're very welcome if you can find the money.
Couldn't afford it, I don't think. Actually, I will watch that. Early Doors with Craig Cash. I will watch that on BBC's iPlayer.
Yeah, very funny. Maxine Peake's in it as well, who we mentioned earlier as well. So that's it. That's it for the 10th and final episode of season 2. It's a season finale. What are we going to do?
Well, what we're going to do, we're going to come back next week.
And
we're just going to call it season 3.
Do I not get a break from you?
No, you get a 7-day break until next Monday.
Well, actually, we've got a by-election to talk about, haven't we?
Yeah.
West Lancashire goes to the polls on February the 9th to elect a successor to Rosie Cooper.
Yeah.
It's going to be Labour, isn't it?
Well, I tell you what, if it's not Labour, we've got a lot to talk about.
Anyway, please follow us. Give us a review. Tell all your friends about us. And don't forget to press the subscribe button. Follow us on Twitter.
18% increase in subscribers we've had.
Yeah, keep going. Don't forget to press the subscribe button. Keep saying that. Follow us on Twitter at northern_spin1. Watch us on YouTube.
Yeah, and thank you to our sponsors, of course. Thank you to What Media.
Yeah, and thanks to Oscar Technology, Lily Shippen, Elliot for providing the music in between working in the Scott in Marplebridge. And my name is Michael Taylor.
And my name, as always, is Happy Chappy Chris Maguire.